Hello everyone, it's Word Up here, and I'm back again here to talk more about the Legion beta blogs. So, you've already got my first impressions video, which I streamed last Tuesday after the release came out, and also there is the FinalbossTV video that both will be linked in the description below, in which I talked with Bay about more advanced impressions and thoughts on the direction of the blog itself. Here, I'm going to be discussing more in depth the problems piece by piece and the upsides of these changes and the potential benefits that it could provide for enhancement going forward into Legion. There's also in the description below a supplement article that I've written and an area below that highlights what will need to be tested and checked and verified before we can make a full encompassing judgment on how the spec has ultimately benefited or lost from the changes. So, moving straight into it, it's very obvious from the reactions of the Shaman community, if you go anywhere, be it Reddit or MMO Champion or even the general forums, that the reaction was muted at best for enhancement and displeased at worst. The general consensus was that there was a way too much of a comparison between enhancement and WoD Fury, which I also am guilty of noticing and also saying myself. But there is obviously a problem with making that comparison until we see how the two different resource systems will work, because we have a lot more fine-tuned and integrated generation system in there through the Mastery and Wind Fury and Storm Fury, that it may be enough to cause that differentiation, but I can absolutely see where the parallels are drawn, and for some people who may have played a warrior and don't like it, that could be enough to cause the reaction that they were not impressed by the blog. So that answers one of those big questions I've seen around as to why the reaction was so stark. It also plays into how big of a change it was, and it did come completely out of nowhere. They mentioned Maelstrom at BlizzCon, and a lot of the theorizing behind it was basically that Stormstrike and Lavalash would generate and then we'd spend on something, and it would basically be what Elemental got, which is essentially a shell of a resource system around what we have now. But instead, we got a complete ground up, visually at least, rework as to how we currently are playing. So, looking at the elephant in the room that is Maelstrom, it does have potential for improvements on the class, and that's undeniable. With a resource system, it means that it has much more interaction inbuilt into the way that it plays, and it means that there's also more room for some spells to be a little bit undertuned, and that coming through later on, with the other spells being perhaps overtuned to carry that slack. It also, which is a really important thing that I didn't factor in originally, lets there be more room for management and gaps in the rotation. Now, currently, there is no gap. There is no downtime whatsoever in our present rotation. There is no room to add in new talents or anything else because there simply isn't the space to press more buttons. Whilst with this, there is room. They could add, say, a cooldown generator. So that means that that's another spell that we can cast to weave into our current general rotations. Or, alternatively, they could have a big cooldown spender, or different interactions with the way we generate and spend it on cooldowns, passives, and procs, which can't currently be added to the game. Because, as I'm sure many people will comment, our talent tree is somewhat underwhelming in terms of variance, what it does, how it feels when you make a choice. Quite a lot of them are very samey, and this could be the fix for that. This could be what you need to allow the devs to add in those cool ideas that you've always wanted. So, with everything that's good, there is, however, the opportunity for problems to arise. So, the biggest and most obvious one for me, and one that I'm still worried about now, is that our primary spender is going to be limited by a very long cooldown or an RNG proc. Now, it may be mitigated by the mastery scaling, but that means that there is complete and total variance in whether or not you're going to get to spend your resource when you want to on that spell. It means that on, say, a priority target add, you may not get those procs, and without those procs, you don't do enough damage to it, and suddenly the RNG has hampered you. You may have pooled the resources, but you never got to spend it on what you wanted to. This definitely has room to be improved on in talents in some spaces, especially I see things like Ancestral Swiftness being on the chopping block for something maybe interacting with Storm Fury. There's also the twofold RNG aspect of our big bursty spike of resource generation to come through Wind Fury, which is an auto attack proc. Now, if these come at the wrong time, again, it could spike us over cap where we're currently holding it, or it could come too rarely, and then we don't have the resources to spend the Storm Fury procs in time and on demand. This also, again, since I mentioned both of those now, leads straight into Mastery, currently in the blog having conflicting scaling directions. So, as I mentioned on the Final Boss video, the Mastery will improve your nature damage up directly, so Lava Lash and Rock Biter's damage will go straight up, whilst Storm Strikes instead increases the frequency that you can use them, so the damage will stay the same, effectively, if we assume no agility increases and so on. So that means that the delta between Storm Strike and Lava Lash as casts is going to go down, whilst the frequency that you can press Storm Strike and are encouraged to goes up. So Storm Strike is always going to have to be at least 2 times as strong as Lava Lash, notwithstanding procs, to be used guaranteed for that global. And Lava Lash is always going to need to be worth spending the global and the resource on versus the opportunity cost of casting Rock Biter and generating Maelstrom instead. So that is going to need a fine-tooth comb on the tuning to make sure that those 3 spells are in perfect balance, or else it won't work. So with our resource generation, as I've said there is going to be a high peak in which we could generate, in the space of 3 seconds, 95 Maelstrom through 4 auto attacks in that period, which is 20, and then say 2 Wind Fury procs off those auto attacks, which is another 30, and then 3 Rock Biters at the beginning, middle, and end on the global, which is another 45, which is a massive swing of Maelstrom, versus alternatively take the Rock Biters out, that's 45 away, now you're only getting 50. Or you got no Wind Furies during that period and you didn't Rock Biter, you only got 20. So that, again, is going to be interesting to play with, and we'll need a lot of sort of mechanical feel tests to see whether or not it's enough to be noticeable and make it unpleasant to play. But it's not all doom and gloom with things. The loss of the AoE niche that Warcraft devs have tweeted out is something that is really going to impact us a lot, because it's very obvious throughout Warlords that Fire Nova became a bit too much of a balanced tool, in which that was what we were tuned against. And it almost felt like we were fighting against Fire Nova for some periods of the expansion, trying to break out of the mold and become better at something other than mass AoE. It also leaves room with the new talent system for Fire Nova to potentially just be relegated to a talent, so that we can actively talent into the big punchy AoE, maybe at the cost of cleave, but keep what they've given us instead, which would be Crash Lightning, which is the frontal cleave causing Stormstrike and Lava Lash to cleave when it goes off, which is a much more linear scaling. You press it and every extra mob is going to receive your spenders as well, in the words that they've used, which may not exactly be how it's implemented, but that's how I've interpreted it. Other spells, Flame Tongue is a bit boring. It's basically Unleash combined with Flame Shock. It does have the potential with Crash Lightning that it will splash when we do it, which is something that Flame Tongue currently doesn't have, but that, again, remains to be seen. The numbers, though, are basically going to have a massive change on the playstyle. It's going to be the biggest impact that you're going to see. If it's tuned right and Mastery feels good, then we're going to have a nice free-flowing, spiky resource that we need to take advantage of, and we're going to have procs coming that are going to be basically like Maelstrom is now, that we have to react to and spend. And then we're going to have the downtime of generating and management, with room for talents that may or may not mitigate some of these problems or may enhance the gameplay a bit. No pun intended. So that's something that I'd probably say be a bit more open-minded about because the worry is there, and I completely understand and empathise with you all. But there is room, and I have some faith in the devs that they've actually put some things in to fill that out through the talents and the artifact system, since there's innumerable opportunities to do so. Because when you look at it down at the bottom level, a lot of what we've asked for over the course of Warlords is present in this preview. We've asked for more defined roles between Stormstrike and Lava Lash because they had started to blur into the same spell. Not including the buffs and the debuffs that came for different times to sort of separate them. Now, Stormstrike is a big, heavy cost finisher. Lava Lash is a filler spender. So they both have their own specific roles. There's more interaction between our spells and our attacks via resource generation through our spell Rockbiter, and then expenditure through our strikes in Stormstrike and Lava Lash. That can be expanded upon, and that could be a really cool design. There's a bit of limbo on the cooldowns. We don't know what's happening to Ascendants or Wolves or even Elementals for us, so that's something that we really do need to know. That may have a big impact on how we play, because obviously at the moment, from what it looks like, we're going to start a fight with 0 Maelstrom, so we're going to have that ramp-up time that we've never ever had before, which could be really jarring for some players. But cooldowns, again, they have the room to mitigate that. And lastly, there is some room for some cool animations coming with these talents. I mean, Sundering sounds like a cool spell. Crash Lightning sounds like a cool spell. They both have a place there to have something that looks really cool, which isn't something that we've really got at the moment. After we lost Stormblast, at least. So we press these buttons. We look really cool. We look like Thrall. We're smashing in the ground. Big melee shaman. So that's something to look forward to. So, on the whole, as a last impressions kind of thing, a lot of my opinions are in the article that you can read there. But I'd say the blog was out of context in a lot of places. We do need to know more, but it's not as much doom and gloom as was there on the first day. If you step back and look at it from a more objective point, the class could gain from this, and it does stand to leave more room for development on it. So be a bit more open-minded and pragmatic about it, I think, but do still be apprehensive and ready to really pick apart Legion, because that's going to be the make or break decider on just how good Enhancement ends up being. So thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please comment below if you liked it, you wanted to see more maybe of this kind of one-to-one video about the class. And if you have any questions, comments, or otherwise, please feel free to ask. And I'll see you next time.